Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Board Student Achievement and District Instructional Committee meeting for today. And I'll call the roll. Ms. Weinberg? Here. Mr. Craig? Here. And of course, I'm here. So welcome, everybody. We have a packed room, and I'm going to start this meeting off. It's not, I promise only to take a couple minutes, but I did want to say this. I think that one of the things that I'm going to be discussing with the committee under other business is the process for how we gather and work around the agenda. I've been aware just in that there are some concerns about timeliness and what's expected and not knowing and all of that. And I think those are things that I want to make sure that this committee cleans up. I also know that in many of the cases, the committee is behind the 8 ball. And what I mean by that is, like, I know the science curriculum was adopted, and there are things that get adopted, and then we come and present. So we're going to have conversation, and that's a conversation, I think, just for the people, the staff representatives and the board. But I just want to say I really appreciate everybody just making sure that they came today to present. It's good to see that even, in some cases on short notice, that you're asked to do this or become aware that you're supposed to do it and you did it. So I appreciate you being here. Now, as we present, given that we have a number of presentations, I would only ask that you do your best to try to limit the presentation to 10 minutes or so, maybe 15 minutes, but realize that there may be questions at the end and we want to have some discussion. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. And I believe that we have Brandi Foster presenting the science adoption update. And I am going to take the liberty. This is Brandi's first time presenting to a board committee, so I'm sure she's nervous. Don't be nervous. And I'm going to announce to everybody that I've known Brandi since before she was a baby. So this is, I always say, whenever I see some of the students and teachers and administrators who I knew as kids, I coached them in softball and all that, I'm always proud to see them in their element. So I'm happy Brandi's here, and I'm going to call her mother and tell her all that. Thank you.
And we are so excited that Brandi is here as well. This is her first year as our high school science coach. She comes to us in Macon. She taught chemistry there. She's going to give a quick update on and review of the adoption of our science materials, and then talk about some of the things that we're doing now to prepare for implementation next year. And we wanted to start by saying thank you for adopting our curriculum. And so, in a month now.
Yeah. Thank you once again, Emily. Thank you, board, for allowing me to speak today. Once again, my name is Brandi Foster. I'm the 9 through 12 instructional coach, and I will be giving you the updates on the science adoption. First, I want to introduce you to our team. Elizabeth Wolf, who is our science manager, Connie Campbell, who is our K through 5 science coach, and Lori Cooper, who is our middle school 6 through 8 coach. Next slide, please. What you're looking at now is our key driver diagram, and this identifies all of the strategic goals for our science department and how we plan to get there. So if you look at this, the white boxes are our current portfolio projects, and these are things that we are currently working on. The implementation of the adopted curriculum is one major component of that, but there are other things that we plan to do to get our students to proficient on the MAP test for May 2026. Next slide. So just a little bit of background of our science adoption. We started this process by sending out a survey to our students to get some feedback and to help empower them. And we have 18 schools that were represented from the survey that we sent out to all 9th graders. And because of the survey data, we were able to adopt the astronomy course. And that is a new adoption to our high school curriculum. We also held a community event where we had 1,000 family members, CPS family members, come out to the Cincinnati Museum Center downtown. And it was an amazing event where they came and they got to see the vendors that we were looking at piloting, and they got to give feedback through QR codes and written responses. And from that feedback, we were able to eliminate one of the vendors from our pilot because the community did not agree with them. Next slide, please. And so we wanted to make sure that in this process, we're not only looking at our students, we're looking at our community, we're looking at our teachers. And so our curriculum council was able to sit down and go through some must-haves. And so we wanted to make sure that the curriculum was hands-on, that it was accessible to all learners, that diversity was being represented, and that we really had real-world connections. The flip to the next generation science standards, or the national standards, gained 90% approval rating from our teachers. They really believe in it, and we feel like moving forward, it is going to be a wonderful addition to our science program. We had 75 teachers pilot the different curriculums across CPS. So K through 12, elementary schools, Title I schools, all different variety of schools piloting. And from that pilot, we were able to choose 2 different curriculums for K through 8 and 9 through 12. And it was also approved by the board in February. Thank you very, very much. And I just want to point out that this will be the first curriculum that we've adopted in 21 years.
Yes, it is.
So we are very, very excited. So for our kindergarten through 8th grade, we did choose the Amplify Science curriculum. It is a green rated curriculum on Ed Reports. For 9 through 12, we chose the Inspire from McGraw-Hill. As you can see, both curriculums have tiered instructional resources for all our students, digital simulations, and they also come with prepared Google Classroom slides that will help to lessen the amount of planning time for our teachers. The Inspire curriculum comes with a new set of materials and hands-on lab equipment, whereas the Amplify comes with kits that are already prepackaged and put together for the teachers. Next slide, please. So right now, all teachers, all science teachers, there are some self-contained teachers and administrators have access to the curriculum. During our March 7th PD, Amplify and Inspire were able to give PD to our teachers, and we had about 350 teachers show up to that PD, and they all were given access and shown how to go through the different programs for each different platform. Next slide, please. And so I want to apologize for the very light picture there, but we do have some early implementation. We have teachers who have gone in to play with the materials, to look at things that are going on, to start to plan, and all of these different things that they're doing. We have talked to our teachers about cleaning out their labs and their classrooms, making room for the new materials. We are planning additional PD opportunities before school starts in August. Principal PD will be happening in June. It's on their calendars. They know about it. So we'll be having that done. We are also presenting at the IPC conference. So teachers who missed the previous PD can come to the IPC conference, and I'll be holding a session as well as our K through 5 instructional coach, Connie Campbell. We are scheduling time at the new teacher orientation during that week so that we can prepare our new teachers. And we're also starting to put together some optional PD for teachers before the contract year starts. And this will be optional for all teachers. Next slide, please. Now, with the switch and the new standards and the new curriculum, we felt it necessary to develop an evidence of success. And this is a document for our teachers and administrators so that when you walk into a science classroom, you kind of, there are things that you should see. And so this is a combination of the best practices from our curriculum, the NGSS standards, culturally responsive teaching, as well as the Ohio evaluation rubric. And so just to kind of point out some things, we wanted to make sure that we hit all areas. So what should the classroom look like in a successful science classroom? What should teachers be doing? What should you hear from students? Even down to the cultural responsive portion of the climate, greeting your students, having agendas, posting your times, all of these things that we consider best practice. Next slide, please. Once we adopted the NGSS, all of the year at a glances had to be rewritten. So a year at a glance is just what it sounds like. It is a document that identifies the standards that should be taught in which quarter, in what order, and just identifies just the standards. And this is something that teachers will look at the very beginning to start to get ideas about the flow of their year. And all of these have been rewritten. Teachers have them, and we have them written for K through 12, all subjects. Those are done. Next slide, please. The curriculum maps are currently being written. We do have them written for our tested subjects in 5, 8, and biology. And these just give a deeper dive into the curriculum and identifies the units, the lessons, the modules, how they align to the standards. And with these curriculum maps, one thing I would like to highlight is something that our manager worked really hard on, Liz Wolf, establishing the community partners and making sure that they reorganize their programs to fit our NGSS standards. So for every subject, every grade, every unit, every alignment, you will have a free or reduced experience that you can offer to your students, or that we can offer to our students. Next slide, please. And so what are the next steps? Next steps are for us to continue to write the curriculum maps. We should be done with those by the end of the school year for Curriculum Council to review and give feedback on. The high school RFP for lab materials has been posted, and that is being looked at by vendors as we speak. We are going to make sure that we start to collaborate with facilities. As you know, school buildings are closed in June, so we need to make sure that we are collaborating with facilities so that we have a hopefully stress-free delivery of all of the lab materials. It is a massive list. It's a lot of delivery, so we want to make sure that we're collaborating with them so that happens. We are creating learning walks and doing some documentation on how to do our in-person walks. When we start, we want to make sure we're looking at the first 30, 60, and 90 days so that we can support our teachers full-fledged. And then also we want to monitor the impact on literacy. Science is a background knowledge subject, and we know that from the science of reading that if you have a full curriculum of science, kids are more likely to read on a grade level. There is an emphasis in writing in our curriculum. It is embedded in both curriculums. We want to make sure that we have been able to talk to other districts that have these curriculums, and they have seen a growth in their nonfiction literacy skills. And we expect the same. We went through and started to align all of our high school courses with the math courses. So we're identifying all of the different standards in Common Core with our science standards. We want this to be a collaborative effort. We understand that if they have a great science curriculum and a great science background, it flourishes into other subjects. And so we're hoping that through this adoption, and we're confident through this adoption that we are going to be able to see those scores rise. Next slide. So once again, I want to thank everyone for allowing me to speak today. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you. Short and sweet. So I want to open it up for questions or comments from board members, and I have a few myself. Any?
I'll just say thank you so much for presenting. I know as a former educator, I always love to hear the new things that are going to be coming to our students, and I love the hands-on approach. I know my students really want a curriculum that had hands-on and really getting them engaged. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that really struck me in the presentation. And first was the working with the community partners to really update and work with you to collaboratively provide those additional resources. I think far too often our students think of some of these classes as just the classroom that I go to is where I learn science, and you learn science in so many other spaces. And so that also gives the community partners an opportunity it really provide that additional education. And then I loved the part that you were talking about at the end there with regards to focusing on the impact on writing and really building that end to it. Our subject matters do cross over a lot more than sometimes we think about. And unfortunately, a lot of times, especially you look at some of the folks on college level, you get so narrowed out that you have not focused on writing, and it shows. And so I think giving that that's a leg up for our students to be able to write well and think well.
I'm sorry. We wanted to make sure that we were being collaborative with other subjects. We understand in the science community, we've always known that science reaches everything. Like it's the study of logic, right? And so we wanted to make sure that moving forward, we're working with everybody because we're in this together.
Love that.
Cool. So I have a few. I too was very happy to hear how you involve students. Students will tell you they're very transparent and honest about their thinking about certain things, so they're going to tell you if a curriculum is boring or whatever, So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the engagement that you had with teachers and those who are going to be in the trenches of the work, which I also think is important. And also I agree with Brandon around the alignment with other subjects. And one of the questions that I wrote down before you moved to the screen that had this was, how are we measuring success, not only in the implementation, but also in student achievement? So I am recommending that that the next time you come to this committee, we're going to be asking if you could show us some preliminary data. Doesn't have to be perfect data, doesn't have to be the best data. It has to be data, something that we can really look at and begin to critique. Okay. So we want baseline information about what's going on and how things are going. And then finally, what was my question? So this is, I heard you say this was a new curriculum. We hadn't had an update in 21 years. What's sort of the standard for when you update the curriculum?
We 10 years ago, we went away from adoption cycles because of the adoption of the Common Core across the nation, and vendors' products didn't align to that. When that happened, we got really casual with supplementing. So now we are on a 6-year adoption cycle, so that every 6 years we're a different content area.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good news for us. I mean, to educate us, and I guess just to share with people, the three of us have never served on student achievement. So this is all new information for us, and trying to really get into the grit of the work so that by the time, I don't want to say end of the year, but we're almost at mid-year now, we'll have a better sense of even what questions to ask. So I appreciate that. So thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right. And I just want to say, too, anybody, if you don't want to stay, if you do your presentation and you choose not to stay, I'm okay with you leaving. I'm going to call your mother and tell on you. So we have the second presentation is, and I believe who's doing that? Okay. So this was this also presented maybe within the past?
It was presented in October, but I know you're a new committee.
Yeah.
So
thank you. And I appreciate your patience and your understanding around that. Thank you.
No worries at all. And I have updated information, and I apologize for my voice. It's probably going to hurt you more to hear it than it is me to talk. So I did update some of the numbers in there, so this isn't a complete repeat of everything that was in October. You do have some new information on here. And what we're focusing on are basically referrals for, it was referrals for English learners and for students with disabilities. What I would like to point out, if you could go one more slide, Rob, is that we don't actually English learners don't actually get referred. There is an identification process that we go through. Every time a student enrolls in the district, the parents will automatically fill out the language usage survey as part of the enrollment process. And it's through that they are flagged. There are 3 specific questions they're asked. And if any one of the answers to this, it's what language did the student first speak, what language is spoken in the home, and what language is spoken by the parents. And if any of those is something other than English, the student is automatically flagged. And then what happens is they are screened using the, we call it the OELPS. It's Ohio English Language Proficiency Screener. You know, we like to make acronyms out of everything. We say we're OELPSing them because that's what we like to do. We do all students at the beginning of the year within 30 days of the first day of school, or if they enroll after the first day of school, we have 2 weeks. And then once that screener is done, the parents are notified within 2 weeks of those results. And as long as the parent agrees, an LEP plan will be written and served by our staff if it's appropriate for that student. And you should all have at your spot this, which is a much longer version of what I just said with a lot more details on it that you probably don't want to go into right now, but this has the whole process on it. And I think the next slide has some numbers about this year's screener. So this year we have screened 993 students. So keep in mind, we only screen students who are new to our district. So those are not like repeat kids. These are new screeners. And what those numbers mean is that, well, I want to make sure that I say the right thing. 5% of them, so 53 of those students just need no services. They're totally fine. They don't need any services from us. They're fully proficient. The students who are in the yellow, the 301, are kind of mid-level proficiency and still need some supports. And then the students in the red, which you can tell that's the majority of them, were at a beginning proficiency level and so need quite a lot of supports. So if you go to the next slide, this is just it would be impossible for me to put them all in here and stay within the time that we have together today, but some of the supports that we give our students, some of the newcomers to our country, we work with them in sheltered classrooms that we call SLIFE classrooms. And if you hear the acronym SLIFE, that stands for Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. So those are often refugees, newcomers to the country who haven't been in school for a while. We have that for them. We also have pull-out supports, push-in supports, consultative supports, all, a whole spectrum of services that we provide for them, and it's completely dependent on what the student needs. And then on the next slide, this is just an FYI, because we always like to make sure that we know who we're working with. This is just an example of this is our current enrollment. And what I wanted to point out to you is a word, if you see at the bottom, the word is multilingual learners, and you may see that used now or see the acronym MLL. That's sort of the one of the newest words that we're using to refer to this population of students. It's a little bit more encompassing than English learners. It includes a broader group of students while still making sure that the students who are under there are included too. I wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. And so you can see the process for, and that was perfect. Nope, that was perfect, Rob, thank you. The process for kind of finding our students who are English speakers or multilingual learners is pretty simple and straightforward. It's pretty different for students with disabilities. If on the next slide, we talk about child find, which if you've heard that word, that is the word that IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that is the term that they use for describing the district's responsibility to find students with disabilities within their boundaries. So it's not the parents' responsibility to bring the students to us and let us know that this is going on. It's our responsibility as a district to make sure that we're finding them and providing them with what they need. And I just want to point out that is whether they are going to our schools or not. That's also for students who are homeschooled or attend private schools due to their parents' choice. So another thing that you have in front of you is this, and I'm super excited about it. This is, you may not be as excited as I am about this, but this evaluation roadmap is a new document from ODE this year, and it's about 157 times better than the one that was out before. So I'm very, very excited about it. What's so great about it, and I'm sure that you'll all just take it and read it all cover to cover when you leave here. What's so great about it is that it has the graphic, which gives you the overall picture. But then it goes in depth behind it. And this was missing for a lot of families before. So it's just really great to be able to have this for folks. And so again, I could probably spend hours talking with you about the evaluation process, but I'll spare you and give you kind of a high level overview, which is that a student can be referred for evaluation to special education services by their parent, by another adult who works with the student, by a teacher, anyone in the school district. It can come from anyone. And that, again, is part of our child find obligation if we suspect that the student has a disability. And at that point, the district has 30 days to respond to the parent or guardian about whether or not they suspect a disability. So two things can happen. The district could say, okay, we've looked at your request and we've looked at the student's data and we actually don't suspect a disability, so we're not going to evaluate. That can happen, and when that does, we have to give them what's called a prior written notice, and we put that in writing and give that to the parent. If the parent doesn't agree with that, that's kind of a whole other subject that we probably don't want to go into today. What happens more often than not, though, is the district says, yep, we agree, we think we should evaluate the student. We see some evidence that there's, something that we should look into. So they get parent consent written, and at that point, they have 60 days to complete the evaluation. So during that process, they could be looking for all kinds of things. The team gets together and plans what they're going to look for based on what the student's needs are. No two students' evaluations look the same. It depends on the individual needs that that student has. They come together and they plan what they're looking for. They'll do their evaluations, and they come back together as a team to do what's called an eligibility determination. And at that point, it's called an initial evaluation team report. You may have heard it called an ETR, the student's evaluation team report. The first one is called an initial. And once again, two things can happen. The team can decide that the student is not eligible, the student with disabilities, under one of the IDEA disability categories. And in that case, they will again let the parent know in writing. Or they can decide that the student does qualify for services under one of the IDEA disability categories. And at that point, the team agrees to that, signs off on it, and the team has then 30 more days to develop and implement an IEP for the student. And at that point, then the student does not need to be referred again for anything. They will be reviewed annually with their individual plan, and their evaluation will be done every 3 years at a minimum at that point. So if you go to the next slide, there's just a couple of kind of FYIs on the next slide. I just think it's important to find out that when our teams are evaluating, these are things that they have to consider in their evaluations. Things like language, their culture, the mode of communication that they use can't be used in any way to discriminate against them. The assessments that are used need to take those things into account. And then on the next slide, okay, not the slide I thought it was, it's in a different order. These are, we first put down the number of evaluations that we did this year, and then I wanted to go back and add just for historical information because the number has gone down quite a bit. And at first we thought that might be due to COVID in FY20 because it was much harder to do evaluations when we were not, we did it, but it's a lot harder to do it when you're not in the building. And what we actually think it is now that it's continuing, I think it's partly COVID, but I also honestly think that a lot of it has to do with the foundation of multi-tiered systems of support that we're putting in place in our buildings, and students are getting the interventions that they need, and so they're not needing to be referred as much because we're catching them early. And it's the other thing that you can see on here is that the left column is the number of eligible initial ETRs. So in FY22, 977 students were determined to have a disability and provided with services. 33 went through the evaluation process and were determined to not be eligible for services. And it may not seem like a big deal to see that number, but I think that what that means is because that 33 is such a small number out of the bigger number, it means that we don't have people just willy-nilly referring students. We have good processes in place. The majority of students who are referred really do end up needing the services, and we're not spending a ton of time on evaluating students who really don't end up needing it. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you, this again, an update of our numbers so that you know what we're dealing with. Total, we have nearly 7,000 students in the district with disabilities. And then finally, what I wanted to show you is that the state does monitor it monitors everything we do all the time, that, but it monitors it monitors those dates I told you, the timeliness of those evaluations. It monitors who we're evaluating. It monitors disproportionality, everything. It's there. And we have a pretty good track record in this area. What I wanted to point out is if you go to the next slide, and I believe that this is the last one, just because this has been such a focus lately, it's very hard to see, but you should have it hopefully in your slide deck if you have that. This is our disproportionality. But what they look at is whether or not we are identifying higher numbers of certain subgroups, certain ethnic groups, certain racial groups, if we're identifying them at higher rates than other groups, and if we're placing them in more restrictive environments than other groups. And there is no wiggle room on this. You are either like, you're doing it right and you get all the points, or you miss one student, or you're a tiny bit over it and you get a 0 on it. There's no wiggle room. And we, in all categories, are consistently scoring above, which means that at this point in time, we're not disproportionately identifying kids according to the state guidelines, which I wanted to point out to everyone. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about any of that.
Wonderful. Very good report and very concise. Open to board member comments and questions. I again have a few.
I don't have any.
Mr. Craig?
Just a couple of questions. And so I love the roadmap. I think it's far too often that parents were not aware of the process, and so we're not familiar with kind of what stage they were at in that. And I'm just wondering, is there conversation along that process also about the status that they're at, like when they're going through the different stages, what this means and how that is communicated? Maybe you can tell us a little bit.
Absolutely. So an important thing to remember is that when we say like evaluation team or IEP team for students, that a parent is a member of that team. They're involved. They should be. They're involved in the process from beginning to end. Not only can we not do anything if they don't sign off on it, but they're members of that team. They're part of the planning meeting where they determine what they're going to evaluate. Some of the assessments are even from the parents. If they're depending on what the student has, it might talk about what they're seeing at home from their kid. So they're involved at every step of the way.
That's great. And then I think you kind of touched on it a little bit towards the end there, but I did notice that the number of students who were found not to be eligible has significantly dropped over the last couple of years. And I didn't know if you're just attributing that to being able to better evaluate, that's where that stands, or is it anything else within that process that might be?
I think it's probably a couple I'm sort of guessing. We haven't done an actual root cause analysis or anything, but what I'm suspecting is that we're doing a better job at the beginning. Instead of just evaluating every kid who is referred, really looking at the data and really having those conversations with parents okay, your son or daughter may not be doing exactly what you think they should be doing, and we see the data that you're talking about, but we also have this data, and we can probably continue interventions and do this and see if that works before we refer them to evaluation. So that, I think, is a huge part of it, and also working with our school teams to kind of consistently have the same message that the interventions that we provide for students do not automatically mean that they need to be referred for special education services, that interventions are not a pathway to special education. I think those two things together have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think it's a great sign to see folks are being more interactive along that pathway. doing that evaluation, because I think far too often it feels a lot looser and feels a lot less clear for some parents. But
Thank you. My questions, I have a series. Some of them I think you've already answered, so I won't have to ask them all, but I'm going to follow up with Brandon's comment that he just made. And my question around it was, do we know anything about the impact on COVID on the numbers of referrals and what does that look like? And also tie that to the groups and how the groups are defined. Anything?
When you say group,
the populations of people. You said that according to state guidelines, some of these groups are defined by the state. When they're looking at certain groups, and I'm thinking maybe I could be wrong, so you can correct me. Like demographics, boys, girls, race, ethnic. Yeah.
Yep. So again, we are, and I could actually give you more in-depth data. I'd be happy to share that with you after this meeting from our state profile. It's not quite complete for this year. The second part of the data for this year comes out in May, actually, but it's not quite here yet. But we do have the disproportionality data for all broken down into subgroups, and I'm happy to share that.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, and maybe this is a recommendation, and just so you all know, Phyllis Davis is online taking minutes, so Lord help me if I had to remember all this stuff. But so we're going to recommend that maybe you can just present us some of that analysis on the disproportionality piece. That'll give us a baseline, just something to look at, just to kind of begin thinking about the kinds of questions and data we might want to see in the future.
No, I think that's great. It's also, obviously, it's a huge area of emphasis at the state level as well. And they've actually, the way that they define disproportionality is by a risk ratio, which is basically the student has, so let's say, if Paul is 2 times more likely to be identified as a student with a disability than Emily, that would be that males have a risk ratio of 2.0 because it's 2 times more. And they've actually lowered the acceptable risk ratios at the state level. So this is a major area of focus, and I'd be happy to share that.
So you said that you believe the information may come from the state in May or so?
We have the risk ratio information, I believe. I will double check that the full special education profile for this year will be finished. We'll get the second half. For some reason, they'll put the data out in 2 parts. We get part of it in December and part of it in May.
Okay, so we may add something on the agenda, not in May, I'm not in May, that's too soon, but give you a chance to digest it, and maybe I'll ask Ms. Murphy or Dr. Brown to get back with you to schedule a time that's better where you use time. Okay, then I have a couple more very minor questions. I thought I knew this, but I don't. What's the difference between an IEP and a 504?
That's a great question. So a student with an IEP needs specially designed instruction to help them progress in the curriculum, and they have to be identified in one of 14 categories, 13 if you're above preschool. So they have to fall within certain categories, and they have to actually need specially designed instruction for someone. So they have to need instruction that is individualized for them in either content, methodology, or the way that it's presented to them. It has to be it's something that they need to have in order to make progress while they're in school. A student with a 504 plan also has a disability, but it could be any disability that's defined under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And what those students need are accommodations that allow them to access the curriculum.
Okay.
So they may need, it's nothing that's going to alter what they're being taught or how they're being taught, but it's going to level the playing field and give them access.
Gotcha. And then does the district have, in your department, multilingual speaking staff?
We have some.
Okay.
And do you mean in our actual department or out in the building?
Well, I'm asking
we have
both.
Yes.
Yes, because one of the, I think it's very important. I mean, it's important that we represent the interests of our kids that way, but even more important that they have people who can directly interact with them and be involved.
So we would love to have more. If anybody's listening, we would love to hear more.
Yes.
We would always love to have constantly recruiting for more.
And then a comment. Oftentimes, and I'm still am, but I'm retired, mental health professional. I worked in mental health for 40 years. So I was on the other side of IEPs and 504s and all that and making referrals. And one of the things I noticed then and was curious about it now is when kids are identified with IEPs or 504s, you have to involve the parents. And I want to know from your experience in the district, what's that experience been like for you? And how are parents assisted to be fully engaged? And I know that we have programs like Teen Child that work with the district and all that, but parents they don't understand the terminology, they disagree and sometimes don't know how to verbalize that. So any thoughts about that?
So I think the most important thing to mention is that we do have 2 parent mentors that we work with, that we try as hard as we can to get the word out and have them work with our families of students with disabilities as much as possible. And they're both amazing. And we love it when they're working with family. But on top of that, we have I made a joke about the acronyms before, but we do know that sometimes we lean into that kind of language, and we've tried very hard to turn away from that. Some of the guidelines that we usually follow is that your grandmother, for example, should be able to pick up an IEP and read it and understand what's on that document. It shouldn't be something that only someone in education should be able to understand. So we try very hard to follow those guidelines. Parents need to be involved at nearly every phase of this process.
Every phase.
Not just because they have to legally, but because it just won't be successful if they're not. They know their children best, obviously. And another thing that we do, which I know is not exactly what you meant, but I do want to point it out, is that we have interpreters available when needed for any meeting with parents, and we can translate documents as well into whatever language they need.
Let me just make this comment and then I'm done. When I was working in mental health, prior to my tenure on the board, there was lots of contention between the mental health community and the district. And I will say, just my experience since I've been here has that the relationships have improved significantly in terms of the student services component of things and how that's working. So most of the time when I hear from families, they're very pleased. You know, sometimes they'll call and they have an issue and I just direct them to somebody else. But most of the time they're pleased to just have simple questions. So I think it's come a long way. So thank you. And I'm looking forward. I think you were out, Ms. Murphy. We were talking about maybe inviting them back after Ms. Rees has a chance to kind of digest the data. We can have them back sometime around when school starts or whatever. I know that's a busy time. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Good. All right. Our next presentation. You do evaluation roadmap?
I did.
You did that?
Yep.
Okay. College Credit Plus?
Yes, hello. Good
Hello.
afternoon. I'm Emily Maroney. I'm the college manager for the district. With me is my esteemed teammate, Danielle Reed-Filek, who is our college specialist, one of them, and also the guru, I call, of our CCP work here in the district. So since this is new to some of you, we're just going to do, Rob, next slide, please. We're going to do what College Credit Plus is. That is dual enrollment. Here in the state of Ohio, it's called College Credit Plus, where a student can do both college work and get high school credit simultaneously. And so we love to ensure that our students have these opportunities and find growth in these opportunities. Listed here, you'll see our 5 top partners that we have College Credit Plus courses with. The asterisk next to that is indicative of that these courses are taught in the high school. So there's two formats. One is that the college course is taught in the high school setting for the students. This really allows for our students to have access more so to it because we, by the state, provide the transportation, the textbooks, the resources to ensure that this is at no cost or very low cost, and I'll go into that, for students and their families to partake. So again, these asterisks identify where these institutions are in our schools, and then all 5 also have college campus courses that our students transport to take on site. Next slide, please. So when looking at what we're trying to really resolve with College Credit Plus in our district and more broadly in our community, for our 2015 cohort that graduated from CPS, when looking at 6-year graduation rates for them, it's at 26%. That is an alarming number. I do want to say that number is of the entire graduating cohort. So that is not just students who are college bound within that. That's encapsulating the 3 E's, enroll, enlist, employ, so 26%. If we look at the 2015 graduating class that actually matriculated to university, we're looking about 42% of those are graduating in a 6-year time frame. That is a whole nother presentation I'm going to be talking with you all about in June, about college bound and what that looks like, and persistence and attainment within that. We're looking at opportunity gaps that are happening. So not every school in 2019 and even today have the opportunity for in high school College Credit Plus offerings. The ones that we are working towards in the future, having our Euler, Riverview, and CDA still need to have in high school offerings. Additionally, when we look at, so within our 3E data where we ask graduating cohort students, where are you headed within one of the 3 E's, enroll, enlist, or employ, we see there's about a 23% gap for students who identified enroll, actually matriculating and enrolling in that coming semester at a university. So we're trying to look at all these things and look at the participation gaps in CCP. So we know, it is evident that we have participation gaps in ethnicity, particular to our Black identifying community. We have participation gaps in economically disadvantaged student identities, as well as gender, particularly male gender. So these are things that we've been looking at as we expand the program, but also being intentional to say, yes, expansion is great, but how are we really closing that window of inequitable practice? Next slide, please. So here's impact. Nationally, to the left of the screen, if you're looking, we know that students across the board who partake in dual enrollment, or again here in Ohio, College Credit Plus, are 25% more likely to obtain their degree. They are 15% more likely to access college and enroll compared to their peers who did not take dual enrollment. College readiness through the lens of students self-identified, I feel prepared, I feel engaged, an increase of 14% to their peers. And then credit accumulation, a 14% difference with their peers when looking at students in, so for example, the grade band at the post-secondary level. So having obtained and completed the 30 credit hours by the end of their first year, the 60 by the end of their second year, so forth. Students who have taken College Credit Plus or dual enrollment nationally are 91% more likely to persist between their fall to fall matriculation or first to second year, fall to fall persistence, excuse me. And in CPS, we have 16% plus between fall to fall. What that means, 16% plus, here's an interesting little tidbit. 16% is the percentage for students that are taking CCP in the high school. 17% is actually for the students that are taking CCP at the college campus. So we see 1% difference in that I would infer could be that they are, when you're on a college campus, you more so feel that engagement in that post-secondary environment. You have the opportunity. So College Credit Plus, both in the high school, but especially on the college campus, affords students everything that other college students are getting. Going to the library, having resources to the library. If in the class it's built-in tutoring, they're getting that built-in tutoring that instructor has built into the class. Study groups, etc. Still happening at the college level, but we're seeing there's a 1% little lift that is helping with the persistence between fall to fall. Next slide, please. Oh, that's not my page. Let me get to that page. I turned it too fast. So here's this year's snapshot. I do want to say, and I meant to say this at the beginning, This data is January data, okay? So we know that students are still in classes right now, taking college classes and finishing them up. And so this, we can always update this data and plan to. In fact, this is not our first time presenting on College Credit Plus to this committee. This is a continuing story, a continuing evolution of. So 537 students this year took College Credit Plus courses. Within that, that is actually a 10%, we saw a 10% growth in Title I school participation. 91.3% of those students, so when we look at students who have attempted and then actually receive credit for the courses or courses that they took, we're only seeing actually a 4.7% withdrawal rate. So that's for students who talk to their counselor or their teacher and say, this is too much for me. And so we work with that student to say, okay, that doesn't mean not in the future, that just means right now, how can we best support? There is a 4% fail rate. For us, 4% is bigger than it needs to be because it should be ideally 0. But when we look at comparable offerings across our district, that is actually a very high success rate for students that are taking these courses and receiving credit. They're not having to test at the end to be able to articulate this and transfer these credits in. So this is really quite an astounding number for our students and a big win. We had over 1,300 courses that were taken this year. So you can see the credit hours. That is a 2% increase from last year. And then $1.2 million in tuition savings for families. I will say that Danny did the wonderful job. I always ask the question, what's the big picture? What's the big picture? So we're estimating that since 2019, tuition dollar savings for family is at $3.2 million. One of the things I also just want to mention with this in the 537 number, and I will be talking about it later, is there are requirements to partake in CCP. So while this is offered for students from 7th through 12th grade, it is required by the state that the student have completed at least completed Algebra 2 and at least 2 years of high school English. We see that being met in the junior year across the board. That does not mean that students in grade 7 through 12 who have not taken that cannot partake in CCP. That is when we have testing into this, so testing options that result in scores that allow for students to participate in CCP in earlier grades. Additionally, one of the great things, and I'm tooting the horn for her, is that Danny was able to work with the state this year, really advocating as a voice for our district at the state level to lower the GPA by looking at the success rates across the board. So students could at times have someone advocate for them to say, we really believe this student would thrive in this. They might not be at this particular GPA. So the state agreed to across the board lower our GPA to 2.75 for the state for participation. Next slide. Now I'm ready. So what were the intervention strategies to get to this point? So starting in 2019, we hired a staff member to really focus and hone in on what is CCP for our district and where can we go. In expanding, and we'll see in the next chart, not yet, but in the next chart, we'll see the grid of where we were and where we're headed and what that looks like. But conducting analysis, really the drive in this, especially in our high schools, is having teachers who are credentialed to be able to teach these courses. And so ensuring that we got the resources to be able to pay stipends for teachers to take that. We're not asking them to contribute heavy out-of-pocket costs in order to not only grow professionally themselves, but to help our students attain college credit in high school. We piloted and launched new classes. So you'll see in 21 through 22, we went from 33 embedded courses to 45. A big leap in offerings. And this coming year, we're looking to add 7 new classes so that this district will have a total of 52 new embedded courses in high schools for our students to partake in. Next slide, please. So in looking at this and analyzing the data, I really want to hone in on the 2020 through the 2021 year. That was a big, hefty pandemic year, right? So our students were remote majority. We saw an uptick in students taking College Credit Plus in remote environments with our university partners. And so in particular, Walnut, for example, jumped from students enrolled that year in the 300 numbers to jumping back down, you'll see in a second, into kind of the 200s. And we said, why is that? And the more that we leaned into that data and the understanding and hearing from our constituents in the buildings, it was, well, we're back in class now. So we want to build back up to those numbers. But we know that pandemic definitely had an effect. We also know that teacher retention has an effect. If we have a College Credit Plus certificated teacher that does not stay in the district or chooses not to teach that type of course the following year, we can't just hand it off to another teacher. So all these have impacts and where we need to build to ensure the equity in that. So we did, again, have the 10% growth. Some things we want to point out. We were really looking at Black student involvement, looking at male student involvement, and closing gaps in economically disadvantaged student involvement. This year, and we're hoping to see it grow more, especially as course grades come in, we see that our Black student identity participation grew by 5% across the district. Our economic disadvantage gap closed by 14%. We had set a goal of, I think, like 5 or 7, so we were like, okay then, that is exciting. And then we also saw a 3% increase, so a gap closure by 3% for our male identifying students. A survey and study was conducted with our male identifying participating students in College Credit Plus that identified really relationship to be a key driver and indicator of their participation in these programs, because someone said, I think you'd really be good at this. So we are leaning into what does that mean? How do we build more relationship? How do we make it relational instead of just saying, okay, you can partake in College Credit Plus? How do we excite students to want to participate in that, and particularly male students that might not be hearing as they need to? We see you in this opportunity across our schools and really leveraging the skills of our counselors, our teachers, our administrators, as well as the team at the district. Next slide, please. So here is for academic year 19 through now. So you will see, for example, in some places, for example, Hughes started, and this is by student, at 41 students. It maintained that last year and dipped down to 35%. Again, when we look at this data, this can have multiple reasons. It can have that how the Bell schedule worked out and how they decided to semester schedule had one less course offering. It can work out to limited student interest in that cohort year, as well as teacher retention. And anything you want to add to that as you glean data?
Just that our schools were. So at Aiken, for example, they didn't offer anything in their building in 1920, and then we credentialed teachers in 2021, and it jumped to 18. Credentialed another teacher in 2022, and it jumped to 37. And they've had a really, really positive experience. So they're looking to credential another teacher, and we currently have about 15 teachers that we're supporting through a grant to pursue their master's or master's plus 18 in order to be able to offer these classes. And Euler and Riverview are part of that pipeline. So they have teachers that will eventually earn their credentials within the next year or two.
Thank you. And I am actually, you have this in front of you, and if you did not get a packet, I'm happy to hand you one. I believe we got one. That's you. So you can review those numbers, but this is exciting. We are expanding, we are growing, and we're looking as to the why in areas where we may not be at the same time. Next slide. So I already hit on this, but it gives a visual too, where we saw our 5% Black identifying increase, our 3% male increase, as well as our economically disadvantaged 14% gap closure for our students. And so we do see that it's kind of fluctuated, but we're headed into seasons of growth and intentionality to continue that bar trend upwards instead of going down. Next slide, please. So what's next? Always love what's next. Just because we saw success in our Black identifying, our economically disadvantaged, our male, does not mean we are done. We want to see those gap closures increase. We want to continue asking that student narrative, that student voice into the why and the how to really inform our practice as well as our constituents with our teachers and our administration. What is working, what is not working? Where do you feel supported, where do you not? We are looking, again, still in Title I schools. This is critical. We know that in our Title I schools, we often do not see our students matriculating to a post-secondary career in higher education. But when they are able to take courses and see that they can thrive, they are more inclined to do so. So this really does have more of the impact broadly than just within the narrow scope of dual enrollment. Students without residency, we've had some big wins. So without residency is how I like to define our undocumented students across our district and within our state and our nation. We were able to win with, and I call it a win, with some partners. So while the state of Ohio does not and will not, for now, pay for students who are undocumented in status to partake in CCP, I have been paying on behalf of our district their tuition to partake so that they are not withheld from these opportunities. That, however, is still not an equitable practice because it does not change for other students. And so we were able to work with university partners that we've been having these conversations, and our counselors are great in advocating that voice of how do I tell a student that they can do this, and then they have to fill out an application and identify residency. We weren't able to win that part of it, but we were able to get some regional partners to agree not to charge tuition to these students and to absorb the gap themselves. So we're going to continue working on that at the federal level as well, because the federal level has said, well, we tell states they can do whatever they want, so the more we can get them to talk about it, we hope to move the needle. GPA eligible junior senior standing. So we do have over 500 students that are participating in CCP across the board. Of our junior and senior level students, we have 1,649 students this year that could have taken CCP. So what does that mean? Again, that becomes the relational value of being able to say you can, and together we will be able to take these courses, because they articulate not only to your future, but to your present, even if you don't plan to go to college. So really being able to be intentional with that. Expanding our credit potential. So we've increased our college pipelines in our high schools by 7 this year. So we have 11 college pipelines with partners that are intentionally based on ensuring guaranteed admissions, credit accrual, and persistence for our students here in our district. So within that, being able to ensure that the CCP courses offered really articulate to their passion and their majors of interest. The other thing is focus on first. We presented actually to board member Bolton. At the last time I presented as to the why we don't have associate's degree completion as a pathway right now in our district. It does come down to the algebra 2 and the 2 years of English in our district, and the standing by which those students are eligible to do that is, unless we have them test in, is really kind of hard to navigate. And so, but I said we should navigate that. And so building a package that is broader than just in specific schools that can show we do have students that do graduate in our district with associates. What path do they take? So one track can be core. What can you complete as core for your future? And then also, if you have majors of interest, how can we build kind of that interdisciplinary track for you to be able to explore and get either your first semester done while in high school, your first year done, or even for some an associate's. That is what we want to be able to do for our students. As Danny mentioned, we do have an EOAC grant through ODE. We are looking at, again, expanding teachers in these pipelines of finishing their credentialing, being inspired within those tracks, but also finding ways to support them. We know our CCP students do well in their ACT when they take it. So embedding opportunities for teachers to also get ACT training so that they can dualistically help students along these pathways. And then at the district, this is kind of an ask that I'm planting, but dual enrollment and CCP identified and blatant within our strategic plan and priorities moving forward, especially under new leadership and with a new superintendent, and in our one plans across our school and within our district to state what CCP is as we continue that expansion and growth. And this does apply to our state seals. So we have a college ready seal for graduation that is ACT based. Again, if we have students and see the success through CCP with ACT, why can't ACT feed into CCP? It correlates to one another.
These letters.
Yeah, all these acronyms, right? As you said acronyms, and I'm just spouting them. So, but we do have, for example, in our tech seal, our citizenship, science, and honors, that if a student takes a college credit plus, or CCP, and gets a B or higher, they get that seal. Why aren't we encouraging this more and informing to that more? And so that is where we are headed. And there's a lot more to share, but just kind of a highlight, and hopefully what was 10 minutes. So,
I don't know. I didn't even check my clock, but it was good. Yeah, thank you. Board members, questions or comments?
So
Ms. Weinberg?
I have a question as a parent of a 7th grader, and I know you stated that the state has a requirement that they have to complete 2 years of English and then Algebra 2, which would technically make them, they can start 9th grade, right?
So
or 8th
we're
or
seeing
9th?
a trend that it's around junior year is where students are actually meeting that on how they're progressing. But there are tests and options for your student actually to partake in that.
And then my next question would be, who is sharing this information? Like, how is it getting to the students? How is it getting to the parents? Because I don't think a lot of parents know.
Yeah, agree.
So
yes.
how is this being
So
put out
there
there?
is, and I don't want to speak all to this, so I'll let you pipe in a
Okay.
second, but there are CCP nights that we host for the district.
Okay.
This past year we hosted it in November. This coming year we're going to host it in February because we're like, we want to see more success with this. So what is another date and later in the year mean for this? Schools also have Danny come in and talk about CCP offering school specific at a parent night or info night that is happening. A mailer went out to every family with a student that was eligible to partake in this. And so that mailer did go out. Danny, do you know if they went out to 7th grade level?
Went out to all. There's essentially 2 ways to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the testing route, which is basically if you're under junior status.
Okay.
And then there's juniors who are GPA eligible. We know traditionally, just based on our ACT, so the 2 tests you can take to be eligible are ACT with college-ready scores or something called AccuPlacer, which for us, we prefer a test called RightPlacer, which prompts the student to write an essay within an hour, and then that essay is graded within that hour. Or it's actually computer graded. So we have noticed, just from talking with school staff, that taking CCP classes as a 7th grader is not a popular decision for a lot of reasons, right? So maturity-wise, is that student ready to advocate for themselves in a college classroom? Of course, alignment-wise, right? We work really closely with the AP team and with other exposure that students need to be successful in a college class. You typically don't have the writing skills necessary as a 7th grader in order to take that college composition class. So that's why junior year is sort of where we really settled in as far as when it's appropriate to really push this out to families. Although we do have a website that's up and available. We broadcast our CCP night. Our CCP night's on the district calendar. It's in the app. All of those.
And where is that website? And the one thing that I just really want to push forward, I love this. It's great. Just really making sure that our parents are aware. Because I'm a parent, I had no idea.
Yeah. So it's available under the tab.
I think making it a little bit easier because I know it's there, but sometimes it can be very confusing to get to. So just let's really make sure that we're making it accessible. That's one big thing for me, making it accessible and clear and transparent to the parents.
The parent gets where we should.
Yes, and that can be another conversation. Yes.
Yeah, it should be another conversation.
Yes.
Not that it's not important, but
Right.
we're pressed for time. I just want to make sure
That's right.
any other questions, but I did put that in here with a
Yes.
highlight on it.
Highlight.
Because it sounds like that it might be a question. As a matter of fact, there was there was a sort of a remake of the website.
I did
right?
hear about that,
26.
so, yes.
It actually looks nice. So
I haven't got to figure
okay.
it.
All right.
I'll go
So
through it.
any questions,
I
Ms.
just-
Craig?
One brief more statement and question, which is that I think a lot of what is being done with CCP is also beneficial in other areas. I know, for instance, like military service, you can actually get higher rankings when you go into the military, grabbing college credits. These are all these things that I think you all were just talking about in the presentation about even the different certifications and certificates you can get. That's stuff that just should be sold all the way up to the front end for me. And I love that idea because I think for students, they want to see the value. Why am I going to do this? Why am I taking this class? Beyond just, I got to go to college.
Right.
Yeah.
And the dollar amount was another big one for me also. I love that dollar amount part because as a person still paying, Student loans. Nothing personal there for me, but
You might get 10,000 of that wave.
you know, it'd be lovely. It'd be like 10%.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Yeah, I had a list of questions, but you answered them, so
Oh.
that's good. And I think the equity piece is huge, making sure that all of our students have opportunity for exposure and participation. And so maybe the next time you come back, we can have some data on where are some of the gaps and what made the difference in some of the growth areas, that kind of thing. Gives us a baseline look at that. So we really appreciate the opportunity to hear this information, and thank you for repeating it, because I know we've done this before, but thanks again for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We love to share it.
All right.
Emily, can you say on the website where
Yeah.
to go? Are you able to help us navigate where to go?
Yeah. I'm going to need a visual on it. Under academics. And then,
That's why I didn't go there.
oh, Rob's going to bring it up.
I got it. Thank you.
Team effort. Here we go.
I found it. I just didn't know what you said academics, and it's on here on the side. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, sure
Okay.
thing.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
all.
much.
Great job.
Okay, so we have approximately a little more than 15 minutes, and we have three items, two of which may be relatively short. But anyway, the anti-racism and equity policy implementation update is a new agenda item. I don't know who's reporting on.
Shauna.
Shauna, okay.
So I have some great things to share and one not so great piece to share publicly, and that is last month our diversity, equity, inclusion manager had to step away. Her husband is in the military. We appreciate that, and she's decided to move with him. But before she left, she did put some wonderful things in place, including creating a district-wide diversity, equity, and inclusion committee who's really focused on our anti-racism and our equity policies. So along the lines of work that has been done, she, in addition to establishing that committee, one of the pieces in the policy was a requirement for all schools to have a statement around anti-racism in their buildings. So we partner with the communications office, and they are, it's at print, these statements that will go up in our buildings across the District 1. 2, there has been a presentation to the LSDMC, district-wide LSDMC, as the policy does call out a subcommittee of the LSDMC for anti-racism. And so we've been working with school communities to create this subcommittee of the LSDMC. We have also began our training around anti-racism and equity, not only with school staff, including teachers and principals, but also district level employees, including our directors to start with. And then finally, the big deal that we have done, and it's happening right now, it was supposed to stop last Friday due to the treasurer's deadline, but she has extended that deadline a bit. Michelle in her budget did allocate $1,000 per school for diversity, equity, inclusion materials. So she did create a menu of pieces that they could choose from, and then they have self-selected working with their ILTs. And so I want to couple that because it is a part of the DEI work. I'm also on the agenda to talk about school board school pitch night, and one piece was the DARE tool presentation. So committee members, you have in front of you 2 documents. One, we took the DARE tool, which was a little lengthy document, and our experts in the district in this area felt it to be very helpful, but wanted to condense it to as close to a 1-pager as possible when we began to share. So the district's Advancing Racial Equity DARE tool, this is the 1-pager that we are using when we talk to our directors and our school teams about. One piece that I asked them to particularly put in there is an opportunity for a superintendent or assistant superintendents to join a racial equity leadership network. So I'll personally be looking into that, and also sharing with Superintendent Wright as she rolls out her continued vision for what we will do around our DEI work. And then the second page related to the DARE tool in terms of work accomplished, we also wanted to break out, this is brand new, who is responsible for what pieces that are called out in the DARE tool. So you will see anything from the leadership team to the board to curriculum, who have done a lot of work around equity in our curriculum, talent, student services, etc. So this is my update on DEI at this time.
Okay, thank you for that. And I would imagine that we might want to update again, maybe in 6 months or so. We should be farther along. Or is it we're planning on hiring to fill?
So at this point, the superintendent asked me to pause on the hiring,
Okay.
as she wants to share with
Yes.
you,
Okay.
the board first,
Right.
where she would like to go.
Okay.
So yes,
Great.
ma'am.
Okay.
I just had one quick question.
Yes.
Can we have this sent to us so that I can actually click on the link? Since
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. So moving on, oh my gosh, school calendars. And just to refresh for people, as you know, this was one of the conversations we had at the board meeting because policy committee had actually done pretty much most of the work. So Paul was asked to come today to kind of update us on what has been done, where things stand now. But it is my understanding that the calendar or DERS plural, is pretty much ready to move forward to the next step. And you can tell us when and where that is.
Glad to. Thank you.
You have a question beforehand?
I do about the calendar.
Well, can he get
Yes.
it first?
Even though, okay, yes.
So what I shared in the folder for our 3 board members we have calendars with the 22-23 calendar was approved by the whole board in March. We have 2 updates that we need to make to that calendar, and I wanted to bring those to Student Achievement Committee before we took that to the entire board for a vote. One of the changes is properly honoring the January 1st holiday on the 2nd of January. So that would be brought to the board as a correction. And then secondly, adding a earlier return date of August the 12th. Which you will see on that calendar as well. The calendar that's currently posted does not have those changes. Wanted to bring it to Student Achievement Committee. With your approval, I'd like to move it to the full board on the 23rd so we could get it approved and then posted for our families. Secondly, I have provided I was asked to provide 2 additional years calendars. So that would be 23-24 and 24-25. Those calendars follow very similar structure to the 22-23 calendar. And with the approval, we'd like to move those forward for the board for consideration. That would put us 3 years out if the board chooses or Student Achievement Committee chooses to move it to the board for approval. So again, 1, a correction, 2, just bringing the calendars, the future calendars that we were asked to put together to Student Achievement Committee within the decision.
Okay. Questions? Questions?
My question already got answered.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you say that August 18th was being moved up to August 12th as the first day of school?
So it would not be for certificated staff returning on the 12th of August.
But not the first day of school.
Not the first day of
Gotcha.
school.
Okay.
First day of school.
I was
our
confused
students-
there.
Yeah, first day
Okay.
of students will remain exactly the same.
I would have had a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I understood that.
Okay. Is that the teacher molding you?
Yes.
Or the,
I was
Teacher
like,
and
wait a
probably
minute.
parent
Okay.
as well.
Parent, yeah.
It was both.
So my question is, I think we are ready to move it forward for approval, but the 2 additional calendars, there was some concern about us lumping all the calendars together. So these are individually, there were some changes that need to be made in individual calendar years, and all those were made.
There were changes that need to be made for the 22-23, which the board has already approved.
I gotcha.
The original, and then I'd like to bring the changes to the board on the 23rd. Under interim superintendent Amat, I was asked to then create 2 additional calendars out. So they would be
Okay.
posted separately.
Okay.
They follow a very same structure to the 22-23. And the idea was allowing those to be posted out so parents could plan ahead. We get a lot of phone calls about summer camps, summer vacations, holiday breaks. So that was the reason why.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to be clear about that.
Understood.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And so at this point, the next step is then with the board, with the recommendation from this group, move it to the board for approval. On the 23rd?
On the 23rd, yes.
Okay. So we'll make that recommendation. Did you have a comment too? No. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
You're very welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. And then update on school board school. You don't have to take 15 minutes, but just
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. You all have committee members' handouts in front of you. Just really briefly, School Board School is a group of people who come together because they are interested in educational policies and procedures. Vice President Jones, myself, Board Member Morosky, and former Interim Superintendent Amat were invited to participate in a pitch night. We were supposed to select 2 pitches. We left the evening with 4. And so asked for an update on that. I shared with you the DARE tool was one. Second, an update from Assistant Superintendent Bunty, a wonderful pitch by an SCPA student, Jordan Dean, concerning dress code. The Positive Behavior and Intervention Support Committee met with young Jordan, and he was so impressive. Then they took it to the discipline committee, and they have agreed on 2 things. One, to work with LSDMCs about dress code inequities in individual schools, and then to form a district-wide task force. That work is moving forward, young Jordan. The second,
he was a brave soul too.
He was
the
brave.
only student among all the adult presenters.
The second is an update you alluded to a little bit earlier from Krista Boyle, our former Chief Communications Officer, and that was we were asked to do a school finder tool to better help our families navigate what school might be best for their families. In the meantime, that communications office, they were already working on updates to our website, so they weren't able to be here tonight. I asked them if they could put something together that I could share with you, and thus you have this memo. So again, that work is also moving forward. And then the last piece, I'm super excited about this. There was a group who wanted us to do work around recruiting men of color, Black and brown young people to be in front of our students. We happen to be in process of this piece at the same time that they presented this information. We worked with the Green Light Foundation, who sought after Leading Men Fellows, and we are going to partner with them for this fall. So there will be 15 young men of color ages 18, 24 assigned to our preschools. So we're working with talent, Dr. Ross Turpo. We're also working with early childhood, Ms. Vera Brooks, to work with Leading Men Fellows has already hired the person who locally will be over the program. They had a meeting the other day. I missed, Board Member Moffitt attended that meeting, but we are ready to go. Couple of goals: one, to improve literacy and kindergarten readiness from our preschools. The second is to be able to put young men of color in our pipeline, either as paraprofessionals and hopefully as classroom teachers. So this is a paid position. It is a 1-year commitment at a time, but we are doing some work in order to retain the fellows down the line. And then they also have a transportation fund, and they have a college scholarship should they decide to go the route of becoming teachers for our school district.
Questions or comments? Thank you.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
Very excited.
Just quickly, have you had any communication with the director of the school board school program? With
I can circle back to Miss Elise. Yes, in terms of her sharing more information in terms of research that they have done. I probably should give her a more firm update.
Yeah, just an update on where the status of these, so that they know that we are actually
absolutely
that we've
doing the
worked
work.
on them.
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So thanks for that very quick update. We have a few more minutes. I'm actually going to switch these last two. The other business, I really want to talk more about meeting process, but I think for the sake of time, what I'd like to do is just maybe after the meeting, I can meet with Ms. Murphy, but then I have to keep you all in the loop, but you don't have to be here for the meeting, because if we all stay, we have to have it open and it'll be late. but I'll make sure that I communicate with each of you.
No
But
problem.
if I could,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, as you stay. Okay, so we're now at the item for hearing of the public. Do we have any speakers? Ms. Kendra? Do we have any other speakers
Online.
online, Rob?
As of now, no.
Okay,
But
cool.
while she speaks, if anyone wants.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, and I just wanted to clarify, Julie Sellers, I'm standing in for her, so the whole time limit thing, I'm good with speaking without a time limit. I'm checking,
We'll be checking.
committee chair.
Well,
I won't be long though,
okay,
but
thank you.
just wanted to say that up front, clarify up front.
And it really isn't unlimited. That's a misnomer. It
Okay.
really isn't. I mean, it's reasonable when we want to accommodate and be sensitive to collaboration.
I should have
It doesn't
said
mean
not
unlimited.
not the limit.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so
Not
much.
the 2 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
So I just wanted to just share some comments about some of the presentations. One, I wanted to share how excited teachers are about the science curriculum adoption. And I also want to give a shout out to Allison Miller, who is the Curriculum Council Chair, as well as Liz Wolf, who is the Curriculum Manager, for the outstanding collaboration that they did with engaging so many stakeholders. And I think that was evident in the presentation that was given. That alone makes a difference in the implementation and the success, of the curriculum resources. I just want to point out that implementation is also so critical. And that's why I was excited to hear the plans that they had with implementation for professional learning, and also just that culture of collaboration that is not implemented as a compliance checklist. We're coming around, are you doing this, are you doing that? But that teachers are treated as professionals, and there's professional dialogue and discourse, because like she pointed out, it's been 21 years. Teachers didn't sit back and just not teach because there was no adopted curriculum. They have also created things and done and materials that are really helping our children succeed. And so being able to respect that and add this on is really appreciated. I also wanted to share just my excitement about the work done regarding the College Credit Plus. I was sitting here as a parent, Board Member Weinberg, thinking about the same thing you said. Is just we always have to make sure that this communication is getting out to all stakeholders. But I do want to shout out Danielle for the work that she has done to engage teachers and building administrators in identifying what are those factors that really need to be addressed, so that we're not just putting this stuff down on paper, but we're really changing the experiences that our children are having and their opportunity to be successful with College Credit Plus. So we're just really excited about the work they are doing. She specifically reached out to make sure that she had input from all stakeholders, including CFT, and it was very powerful. With the Department of Student Services update, I too was excited to hear about the roadmap. And my question was again about communication. How are we making sure that all stakeholders are aware of this new roadmap and how to implement it successfully, just in that communication piece? And I think that was it. Thank you so much for your time and allowing me to share some comments.
Thank you. We like it when you say you're excited about things. You said that in every single statement. We're excited. And I say that
Collaboration makes a big difference.
it does,
It
absolutely,
does.
and
It really does.
that's the point of board, is that
Yes.
it is important.
Thank you.
And thank you for acknowledging.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. No more? Okay, so board members have any other business other than what I had said in terms of talking with Ms. Murphy? Okay, so having no other business, I declare the meeting adjourned.